Ambassador Ildem, welcome to Border Zone.
Thank you for inviting me.
Do you personally believe that NATO is useful for Georgia, meaning the development of the country and its security?
Well, I think NATO and Georgia are working together. Georgia is a valued partner of NATO. What is important is for countries aspiring to join NATO to have the proper preparation phase. And right now, Georgia is going through the reform process, and NATO recognizes the importance of this reform process to have stronger democratic institutions, to have defense and security institutions to be transparent, compatible with the way those institutions work at NATO, for Georgia to be able to take part in different NATO operations and missions, sharing the same values, and also promoting peace, security, and stability. NATO is not in any way to provoke any party, but rather to make sure that our partners are with the capacity to deal with the complex security challenges in a critical time. And when our neighbors are strong, NATO is also secure.
Talking about the security, would you say that for Georgia especially, it would be much more useful to have, 3-4 NATO battalions somewhere close to so-called borders than discussions and forums that are used by propaganda very effectively, saying that NATO cannot protect its partners?
Well, first of all, we need to understand how important it is for each country to strengthen its own capacity. And it is evident from the events of the past. And we are talking about how important it is, first and foremost, for each country to be able to address the security challenges that they are faced with. Not a single country can depend on what it could get as a support from outside. First, the defense security starts at home. And we see that Georgia is making progress in organizing its defense institutions the way it should be, with more capabilities, and also working together with other partner nations, allies of NATO, participating in operations and missions, and also conducting NATO-Georgia exercises. Therefore, it is important first to develop, build, and strengthen your own national capacities.
Yeah, there are very widely spread message that NATO do not provide membership to Georgia because of the occupied territories. Does NATO really believe that Kremlin may start war against the alliance if Georgia has a membership, considering that only one member of the NATO has a 10 times bigger military budget than Vladimir Putin has?
First of all, I have to emphasize on this occasion that NATO allies attach importance and support the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Georgia within its internationally recognized borders. Therefore, for NATO, Georgia is one and whole. And for us, it is not a matter of those territories that you are implying in your question. We call upon the Russian Federation to reverse its recognition policy and not to continue with those steps, taking the administrative boundary lines to be effectively state borders. So for us, this is not an issue in that respect, since the statement is clear and simple. We respect the territorial integrity and so on.
But do you believe that if Georgia has a membership, Kremlin may start some military actions against the lands?
Well, first of all, Russia should not do it, because it is up to each individual country to choose its own security arrangements. And I served at the OSCE, and Helsinki Final Act is one very important instrument. In this document, and also at NATO-Russia Founding Act, there are stipulations to that effect, that it is up to countries to decide with their own free will where to join, with alliances they could be part of, and which security arrangements that they can make. So the third parties should not be in this equation objecting it one way or another.
These days we're looking at Armenia closely, where people of the country are trying to have their freedom of choice, democracy, and move forward. Do you agree with representatives of post-Soviet Union countries who believe, based on price that Georgia and Ukraine paid for their freedom of choice, and the fact that these countries still do not have membership, so real protection, that they are like geopolitical hostages here in the region, with the only choice to stay under control of the Kremlin or meet Kremlin face to face trying to move forward?
Well, again, it is up to each individual nation to determine its course, its orientation, and how to progress in democratization process. If there is such a movement, we can only respect that and recognize it. I don't know how they think about it, but certainly what had happened in 2008 and what had happened in 2014 in breach of rules-based international order do not help. These are not good examples for any country when reflecting upon what their future would be. And that's why NATO insists that Russia should be part of the rules-based international order, abiding with the rules that once all agreed upon, and Russia was part of it. I was referring to both Helsinki Final Act and NATO-Russia founding document Founding Act.
The US and the NATO call Russia a threat, blaming for their support of Assad regime or blaming them for usage of chemical weapon in London. But when we come to some real actions like, I don't know, Georgia and Ukraine in the NATO and etc., we don't see some very active results, very fast results. Do you agree with the very, very widely spread message that these conflicts, I mean Syria, Ukraine, Georgia, are not about these countries, but about some permanent confrontation between the US and Russia and NATO as well, that is profitable for both sides in some way?
Well, first we have to put the discussion into a proper context. We are talking about aspirations of certain nations to join Euro-Atlantic structures, NATO. And there are certain requirements and criteria for that. Therefore, it should not be taken as a process in which considerations are more on the relationship with Russia. We are talking about one country, whether they are fulfilling the criteria and getting ready to join Euro-Atlantic structure. And the debate should be more focused on the parameters of this engagement rather than anything else. We keep saying that if countries with such aspirations do meet the criteria and they could contribute to security of NATO, they should be given the chance to join NATO, as has been explained in Article 10 of the Washington Treaty.
Talking about criteria, the strategic partner of Georgia, Turkey, is criticized strongly by the West for human rights violations. Why Georgia do not meet these criteria still, for now, and for example, Turkey meet these criteria?
Well, first of all, let us remember Turkey joined NATO in 1952, and since then Turkey is part of this family, sharing the same values of democracy and rule of law, and making a great contribution to NATO's activities. And in different countries within NATO, we see democracy being functioning in satisfaction of all. And for Turkey, we at the same time recognize the fact that it is one country which has suffered the most out of terrorist attacks. The location of Turkey is such that required Turkish allies to deal with 3.5 million refugees, to accommodate them, to shelter them, to meet their requirements. And they have been supportive of all operations and missions they took part. They are in all decisions taken since we are talking about an alliance that make decisions on a consensus basis. So Turkey's value cannot be denied, and there are different processes in every country, and there may be from time to time different voices coming on, but this is the strength of democracy in that respect. And Georgia, when since you put the question by giving Turkey example and Georgia whether meeting the criteria, all I can say is that Georgia is making quite a progress, and this is recognized and very much supported by all allies.
Are we still far?
You are making important steps, and this is something that we strongly encourage to continue with.
Thank you for the interview.